think they would be beating down the door of their congressional delegation, telling them, appropriate the money, fix this. Instead, they're going and demonstrating and get arrested at ICE facilities and doing performance.
You say they're beating down the door of the ICE facility instead.
Yeah.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM for Monday, May 12th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP co-founder and president Tom Bevan and Washington bureau chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, Donald Trump is off to the Middle East for his first major international trip of his second term in office. It's scheduled to be about a 4-day visit, and the White House has indicated that the focus will be on economics. But the release of American hostage Eden Alexander today shows that regional politics have a way of interfering in these trips. Tom, what do you make of the trip? How do you think it'll play domestically?
Well, I mean, it is notable that this trip he is not going to Israel, right? He is going to that part of the region, but you know that the war in Gaza and is going to be a topic of discussion behind closed doors with all of the countries that he's visiting, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. And Iran is also going to be part of those discussions. So there's no getting away from the geopolitics of that region. But as you said, Andy, this has been portrayed as Trump going abroad to bring, billions, if not trillions of investment back home in the form of business deals and the like. And so I expect that that's how the administration is going to frame it, and how the information that we're going to, get from them will be released. But make no mistake about it, they're going to be talking about those other two subjects a lot.
Yeah, Carl, how do you see the trip?
Well, I guess he's going over to get a free airplane.
Yeah,
sounds like look, if somebody give me a $400 million airplane, I'd go for 4 days. That's $100 million a day value. Even for a deal maker like Donald Trump, pretty extraordinary. If you don't know what I'm talking about, dear listener, Qatar is talking about donating an airplane that President Trump would use for the remainder of his term as Air Force One. And then according to some sources, Trump hopes to take that airplane to put it in the Trump Presidential Library. It's not exactly how the law works or how presidential transportation is arranged, but you hear stories like this and you just want to dismiss them out of hand. But we've learned from Donald Trump, you can't just dismiss these things out of hand. But he's the consummate deal maker. But some of these things are life and death. Getting a hostage released, an American-Israeli hostage from Gaza, that's not a joking matter. That's an important matter. And what the president's doing this week, Andy and Tom, it seems like of a piece. Cut tariffs to China. You go overseas. I mean, he's become this suddenly very interested in foreign policy, trade policy, but also foreign policy writ large and America's place in the world. And we've noticed that throughout his first months in office. We joke about Canada and Greenland, Panama Canal, but Trump has an idea of how he wants what he wants America's place to be in the world, and this seems of a piece with that.
Yeah.
Well, and it is the case, obviously, that presidents can exert a lot more influence in foreign policy matters than oftentimes they can in domestic matters. And let's not leave out the fact, and Trump spoke about this today at the White House, they brokered the peace deal between India and Pakistan, the ceasefire, which is obviously, the tensions in that region. So Trump's got there's a lot going on, and the U.S. is involved in all of it in very significant ways.
Yeah,
just to add, we haven't mentioned Ukraine and Russia.
I was going to say, the other thing he said today was that on Thursday, he wasn't sure where he was supposed to be. He thought he might have some spare time. So he might go over to Istanbul just to sit in, I guess, on the Ukraine talks. It's a different White House, Tom, it feels that, and I can't ever, the question always seems to me, is this just adhocracy? Or is this all planned out and part of a global scheme that us mere mortals just can't quite comprehend?
Did you steal that phrase, adhocracy? I've not heard of that. If not, you should coin it, Andy. That's pretty good.
I don't know. I'm sure I heard it someplace, but anyway.
Feel free
I'll
to
take credit
for it.
Yeah,
it's good.
Sure.
I like
Andy was gone for 2-3 days. He's come back really refreshed.
Just mulling that over. No, I mean, that's this is the thing with Trump is always, is he the mastermind playing 5D chess, or is he just absolutely saying whatever the first thing that pops into his head is? And maybe it's a mix of two. Maybe sometimes he's just being spontaneous, and other times he's thinking, strategically, very strategically behind the scenes about some of this stuff. I certainly think that, with the case of China and the tariffs, which we'll talk about, that was part of his plan, perhaps from the beginning. But a lot of this is, certainly domestically what we've seen, and Trump did some of this in his first. It's issuing shocks to the system, right? It is approaching these things in ways that nobody has done before, because in order to basically disrupt the status quo, and Trump is very good at finding ways to do that, and he's done that on the world stage and certainly domestically more effectively in his second term than in his first.
Yeah. Well, Carl, they're making, or some people in the media are making a big deal of the fact that he's not visiting Israel on this trip. It's his first foreign trip of his second term. He's going to the region. He's not going to go to Israel. But of course, he's had Netanyahu to the White House. So they seem to be in pretty good contact. But does this sort of deal that he made, or what sounds like a deal to get this hostage released, which didn't include Israel in the negotiations, is there a little daylight between the U.S. and Israel opening up on the Gaza war right now?
I don't see that. If I was in Israel, I'd wonder why he wasn't coming there. But he may not need to go there. You go where you're needed, where you're wanted. I think my guess is that relationship's pretty secure right now. But we're talking about President Trump's management style, his leadership style, both of them, and they're separate things. There is an ad hoc nature to it. He seems to drift, careen from one subject to the next, and careen from one position to the next on the same subject, like tariffs with China. And you get the idea he's got a short attention span, and it's all by the seat of his pants. And that's one view. And as a guy, I covered the White House for 15 years. I see that, and it's bracing to me. The other side of that, though, is because Trump was president before and had a non-contiguous term in office, he has an advantage that most presidents don't have. And what I infer from what I'm seeing is that he realizes your time there is short. He's going to be a lame duck in 2 years after the midterms. There's a very reactive job. Presidents are always having to respond. We go to the White House briefing. What's the latest? There's a police shooting in Detroit. What's the president's view on that? And what this president is doing, seems to me, is saying he's not going to be buffeted like that. He's going to try and set the agenda. And it's an interesting use of executive power, and maybe more realistic of the modern constraints on that office, but also the power that you have to set the agenda. And yeah, disruption, Tom used that word, disruptor in chief, sure. But also, the agenda setter, the guy who's going to say, no, this is what we're going to talk about, and this is what we're going to be doing. And so if this works, if this presidency is a success and he gets these things he wants, peace in Russia, peace in Ukraine, bigger deal, a new approach in Gaza by the people living there themselves, all these very ambitious things he's talked about. I think future presidents will take note and say, all right, well, this is, you got to be a little shocking sometimes.
Carl, he's going to get that stuff done in his third and fourth terms. So don't you worry. Yeah. No, I do think the Israelis are nervous about this for a couple of reasons. The example with the Houthis. So Trump, bombed the crap out of them and then struck a deal with them, right? As soon as they agreed not to fire on our ships. Trump is very transactional for the United States. And I think the Israelis are a little bit worried about that they're not going to be involved in these discussions, and they don't really know what Trump might be willing to do or not do behind closed doors with some of these folks, especially if it involves American interests, and those are put, above Israeli interests. And so I think they have a right to be worried about Trump. That's one of the things that I think is makes him effective in some ways, because people don't know they don't know what to make of him in a lot of circumstances. But I think the administration needs to do maybe behind closed doors and back channel with Israelis to assure them that, this relationship is still solid and strong and the like. Because again, Trump is going to be on his own, adhocracy, going rogue, doing whatever he's going to do in these meetings in the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, we got to talk about this plane, Tom. So this is a $400 million Boeing. It's been described as a flying palace. You can get some pictures of it online. I think they're real. It does look pretty deluxe, even for Trump. The Democrats have already attacked him, of course. They've called it flying grift. I don't know if that term will stick, but it's a good one. What do you make of this? And do we need a free plane?
Well, I don't have a problem with America getting a free plane if it's for the U.S. government. Now, if it gets transferred to, into Trump's possession, which is, as Carl said, has been some of the reporting, that's a little bit more problematic. But I also, as is with everything with the media, you can't take these headlines and this sort of, the way they've spun this up at face value. In fact, CNBC wrote an article about this on May 1st, so 11 days ago, talking about the fact that this plane is a used plane. It's not a new plane. It was parked in Florida in the winter. Trump went and looked at it. Trump was interviewed, and he's talked repeatedly about the fact that the current Air Force One is outdated. It's been flying for 40 or 50 years. He's been trying to get a new one from Boeing, and because of all their struggles, they're $2 billion over cost and like 2 years behind schedule, and it pisses him off. So he said, listen, I got to find a plane. We're going to find a plane somehow. So this is not sort of, shocking or sudden. Now, the fact that they're going to give it to us, that seems new, and that does create some interest and some potential conflicts. But again, I don't have a problem if it's given to the United States. But if it's given to Trump specifically, then yeah, that could be a real problem.
Well, I guess it's being given to the Pentagon, Carl, is what they're saying.
Yeah, it shouldn't be given to the United States. We can afford a plane for our president. Tom doesn't have a problem if it's given to the United States. I have a problem with it. One of the things this administration has done is taken aim at these universities, Harvard, and others, Columbia, who take all this money from the Arab world, and then suddenly their history departments and political science departments are stacked with pro-Hamas professors who are poisoning the minds of our students.
And you think Trump's going to do that
right.
against Israel? No, we don't. They don't get. If they were going to give a plane, they're going to want something in return. That's just not the way the United States does business. We pay our way. We pay if there's a used plane he likes, we'll pay him fair market value for it. That's the only way this can go.
Okay, well, Carl, I played a little golf when I was away, and there was this Trump that made this reference to Sam Snead, great golfer. He said, talking about the plane, he said he had a motto: when they give you a putt, you say thank you very much. You pick up your ball and you walk to the next hole. A lot of people are stupid. They say, no, I insist on putting it. And then they putt it, they miss it, and their partner gets angry at them. You know what? Remember that Sam Snead, when they give you a putt, you pick it up and you walk to the next hole. Carl, is it a free putt?
All right. I don't, since it's Trump, I would assume that Sam Snead never actually said that, but I'll quote you another golfer, Jack Nicklaus, said, Andy, you know this, you're going to laugh. When you're in trouble, get out of trouble. Don't make the problem worse. That's what Jack Nicklaus used to say.
I think the lesson from this discussion, Andy, is that we're never giving Carl any putts ever again.
Yeah.
How about that?
I was going to say.
And I need them.
Well, Tom, you're the best golfer of the three of us. So what do you make? Is it a free putt?
I mean, again, look, let me ask Carl. Carl, would you feel the same way if it was Airbus and the government of France giving us this plane? Is it it's the Qataris, or is it the fact that it's given for free?
It's both. First of all, Qatar supports terrorism, and they propped up Hamas. So that check that box. But also, why would we take a free plane from France? We took a statue from them once. I like that statue.
Yeah.
And we saved them twice from the Germans. So maybe they owe us a plane. France, the country you named. But my My idea is that the United States pays its own way, that we don't take favors like that from foreign governments. I think that's sort of just an established principle.
I will say, I mean, we did see, Laura Loomer, who's she posted about this on X and said, look, I love Trump. I'd take a bullet for the guy, but this is wrong. I mean, he's getting some blowback from the right on this. He seemed to dismiss it. He sort of posted something on True Social saying, sort of dismissing the critiques, but I don't know that this is a done deal. We'll have to see how this plays out.
Now he's getting blowback from the middle on this. That's me. Andy, what do you think?
I have to say, I'm kind of with Carl. I don't really like the idea of a free. Can't we give him 10 cents on the dollar or something for it?
You're not getting any putts next time we play golf either.
All right. All right. Well, you're listening to Real Clear Politics. Boy, I regret that. You're listening to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl and Tom. We'll be right back with more after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And guys, the White House announced what it's called a major trade deal with China today. Both sides saying they would roll back extreme tariffs for 90 days. A lot of people were surprised by this because just last week, Treasury Secretary had sort of tempered expectations. But it looks like we're going to avoid this, what was looking like a mutual embargo. Carl, the markets seem to like it. What do you think?
Well, you had half empty container ships going into LA, into the Long Beach port, and fewer container ships. And, when asked about this, Trump was basically saying, yeah, well, maybe, Americans don't have to buy 12 Barbies. Maybe 2 Barbies will do it, whatever he said. This was it was actually starting to be more than a threat. It was starting to be a problem, and it wasn't theoretical. And so, what the president and his trade negotiators done is call a timeout. Wait a minute, let's lower the temperature. So we're going to go back. I think
it's 90 days. You're right.
Their tariff's going to be 10%. Ours is going to be 30%, but only for 90 days. And it doesn't include the items from China that Trump hadn't put a tariff on in his first term. Those are going to remain intact. And the thing about this, all these people attacking Trump and attacking tariffs, including, Democrats, including people in the Biden administration. I remind our listeners from this every once in a while. Biden denounced those tariffs, but then when he was president, he didn't rescind most of them. He kept them in place. So it's not that, Americans believe in zero. These economists believe in zero tariffs. They think they should be targeted and carefully done. When they do that, then they run afoul of Andy Walworth, who says they're being swampy because who gets the breaks on the tariffs? The people with the best lobbyists. So, but what Trump is signaling here is that this is a negotiation, that this was always a negotiation. He doesn't feel about tariffs like it's a religious tenet that we have to have tariffs. And also that it also bolsters, he's given 3 or 4 explanations for what he wants from this. And they're not mutually exclusive. Well, some of them are, but they're not. You can do more than one thing with a tariff. He wants to raise money for the U.S. Treasury, but he also wants to encourage exports. He wants to open American markets. This latest announcement with China signifies to me that they still have their mind on that on fair trade, and that's an old issue. Republicans and Democrats have talked about, as you know, Andy, in Washington for 25 years. If people want to import stuff to us, they need to open their markets to us. And this latest announcement seems that's what they're focused on, at least this week.
Yeah. Well, Tom, this is Dan Goldman from New York, Democratic congressman. He said, we are back where we were before all this chaos, all this turmoil. It's just a reflection that there is no plan here. Nothing is actually going to come from this other than continued higher prices and uncertainty, instability, and a pullback in our economy.
Well, that's the most uncharitable view of the situation, which I guess, if you're a Democrat, that's what you think. But I think this is actually, look, I will say this again. And if you remember heading into these negotiations, Trump posted on True Social something like, he thought 80% sounds good, but it's up to Scott B. Well, Scott B is Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Scotty B is the most important man in this administration for sure. And I think he is a very savvy, smart, wily negotiator. And I think he's helped get Trump out of the pickle that he found himself in with Liberation Day. And look, again, taxing and tariffing China is still popular among the American people because China has for decades been stealing and cheating and lying and breaking all the rules. And, tariffing our partners, our supposed, friends like Canada and Mexico is different. People don't like that as much, but it's still good politics to drive a hard bargain with China. But I think Bessent knows and knew that the markets would respond this way, and that to lower the temperature, again, there's a lot of details that are still going to be worked out. I mean, this is an incredibly complex trading relationship with a lot of different variables in there that are going to have to be worked out. But I think this is a win for the Trump administration, whether you think this gets them back to square one or whether you think this actually advances the ball toward resetting a new trade relationship that's going to be, where China is going to be more open and there's going to be a fairer, more level playing field, which is how, Trump's supporters view it. It was definitely a positive weekend in that regard.
Carl, positive, but I think the Democrats might have some point here, which is that this was very disruptive, bad for the market. Market's recovering, it looks like, but why? I mean, what, again, I don't want to go back to the same metaphor, but this idea that was this all planned out? Was this fourth dimensional chess? Or did he just say something really stupid, which was Liberation Day? And now the forces of all the political forces, all the things that have been pushing for free trade for 50 years, just can't be changed. And we're sort of back to where we were when we started.
Well, we'll learn the answer to that in the coming months and years, Andy. But what, we talk about China as a trade partner, what Tom's saying is right. I mean, what they do is they erect barriers to our goods, not always tariffs, usually administrative barriers that are not transparent. And then when you finally get over there, you have to have a Chinese partner. They steal your technology and then rebrand it as their own and undercut you, dump products. They do all of these things that are in their interest. And this is why Donald Trump has this odd rhetorical tick. He'll say how smart they are, how savvy they are, how brilliant they are, because he doesn't begrudge them wanting to gain an advantage. But what he's saying is that as he's the president, they're not going to cheat on my watch. And so I think the answer to your question, I don't get, often Trump does things that I don't understand. The renaming the Gulf of Mexico. I live to be 150. I won't figure that one out. It just seemed to come out of nowhere. But with tariffs, he's been talking about this since long before he was in public life, for 30 or 40 years. And the constant refrain is that China cheats at trade. Well, my guess is that when these tariffs are lowered, there's going to be some follow-up. These negotiations have got to include China starting to play more fair, or the Democrats will be proven right. Mm-hmm. But if there are these things put in place, if China if we see tangible evidence that they're starting to play by the rules, and they have other reasons to do it, they're not the basket case they were 30 years ago when they started doing this. It's a very powerful economy now. They could actually afford to start playing by the rules. And my guess is that's what the administration's pushing them to do. Open up our markets, not steal our intellectual property, not play games with the dollar, not do all the things that they've done that have, in the president's mind, disadvantaged the United States.
Mm. Well, Tom, we do have a trade deal also with the UK. Again, these things happen when I leave, so maybe I should leave the show more often. But it was announced on the 8th. Reduces the tariffs on up to 100,000 British cars that can be sold in the U.S. at a 10% tariff instead of 25% that's charged on the rest of the world. There's no levy on imported British steel, but it does leave in place the 100% tariff on British movies. Some things, I guess, to be negotiated here, but is that a direction that we're seeing? When I look at the China thing and I look at the British thing, obviously two very different deals. But right. It does seem in the British case that they got a couple of the things, that the U.S. got a couple of the things that Trump was asking for. And so maybe in that case, the shock and awe kind of worked.
Yeah, I mean, look, Britain is not like a huge trading partner, but certainly not at the same level as China or
I think we trade more with Vietnam now than with Britain, or they're about the same level, something like that.
But it was important for the administration to do something, get a deal done, and I think more than the sort of details of that, that deal, it was the symbolism of, hey, we actually got a deal done, and it's the beginning of, we keep hearing there are 24 countries we're negotiating with behind the scenes, and a lot more deals to come, and it's all going great. We still, want to see more evidence of that, but it was important for the administration to actually come out and have a deal that looked like a win for both countries. That both countries, Starmer and Trump both waxed poetic about how great it is, and so it was more from a PR standpoint than anything, in my opinion. China, on the other hand, is that is a big deal, and it's an important deal, and the details of that deal are going to matter a lot.
Yeah. Carl, are you going to be able to buy that British imported sports car you've been
Jaguar?
Sure, but but the women in our lives are more worried about, what's going to happen to the next Love Actually or Four Weddings and a Funeral. These are wonderful movies, and Love Actually opened in the United States a week before it opened in Britain, but that's a British director, British filmmaker, and I don't know what. I guess the idea is to film here instead. We talked about that last week, but some of these movies made, these Irish movies, these British movies, they're just really good, and I don't think there's a big appetite for having to spend. What are we going to have to spend $24 now to see to Love Actually Part 2?
Well, they want Love Actually Part 2 to be filmed in Atlanta is what they want, or Hollywood, really. But Carl, they did also leave in place this ban on U.S. beef that has hormones in it, which raises the whole question of sort of non-trade barriers or whatever you call them. But these are sort of restrictions that they put in place for health reasons or for any other reason that sort of protect their domestic beef industry. But it doesn't also, protects them from hormones. If you think hormones are a bad thing in your beef, you can go to Britain and know you're not getting it.
We ought to get Bobby Kennedy on this show and talk about that, because there may be something there. Maybe we ought to get rid of it ourselves.
Right. Tom? So you have no position.
I have no position on the beef industry. Very neutral on beef. Neutral. I like it with hormones, without hormones. I'll eat whatever.
You like Shake Shack and McDonald's.
That's right.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl and Tom. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this. We're going to talk about Newark and the FAA. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. The problems at Newark Airport have gotten so bad that the FAA is now proposing to cut flights there. The problems seem to be a combination of air traffic controller staffing, runway construction that's ongoing, and equipment issues. In particular, problems with the radar systems blacking out. I was flying on Sunday. I can tell you that Atlanta, which I had to fly through, was even more of a mess than unusual. But what is the problem with our air system, and is the FAA going to be able to fix it?
Well, let's hope they can fix it. And, Sean Duffy was on Meet the Press and is working overtime to try and, reassure folks that it's safe to fly. But when you read the details, the air traffic controllers have lost contact with airplanes for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. They were not able to communicate with these airplanes, which is just an absolute lifetime when you're talking about the congestion around an airport like Newark and the tragedy that could happen if something goes bad. And so it's definitely a problem. And, Sean Duffy says, look, these are outdated systems, and we need to invest and get them upgraded as quickly as possible. And in the meantime, they're basically saying, Newark, you can't have that many planes. So I think United's dropped 35 flights from Newark out of their rotation, and other airlines are doing the same. And they're going to have to manage that situation to make sure that, as Duffy said, look, we have to slow everything down around Newark and to keep it as safe as possible. But quite honestly, I wouldn't want to be flying into Newark right now this is the third or fourth time it's happened. And some air traffic controllers have said that, they've seen it happen more in the past. And so it's an ongoing concern and a major one. We do not want to have another air traffic disaster, especially in a place like Newark.
Yeah. And Carl, it would seem to me, say what you want about Newark. When you have a problem like this, there's no reason in my mind it would be restricted to a single airport. If these are the problems that we're having with not enough controllers or not the equipment being outdated, I assume that's at other airports as well.
Well, Andy, I agree with that, and it's alarming. But the Newark thing it sort of underscores what the real underlying problem here is: just a failure of political leadership. Pete Buttigieg, wants to run for president to replace Donald Trump, but he was Secretary of Transportation, and he inherited these problems, and apparently none of the modernization that was called for took place. And in the first Trump administration did deal with this problem's been getting worse for many years. Meanwhile, in Newark, the mayor and the city officials there, you think they would be beating down the door of their congressional delegation, telling them, appropriate the money, fix this. Instead, they're going and demonstrating and get arrested at ICE facilities and doing.
You say they're beating down the door of the ICE facility instead.
Performative art instead of governance. And I think it's an indictment of the whole political system. And it's just and we had a tragedy here in Washington at Reagan National Airport, and yet the Army is still flying helicopters into this space. They've been told not to. Nobody can tell you why it's still going on. Sean Duffy was, apparently called Pete Hegseth and has demanded answers. Congress is demanding answers. There's just, we're in this time of unseriousness with our politics, and it can be tragic. It's scary for Americans, and we just expect more from our government. Meanwhile, there's stories in the conservative press about how they can't hire enough air traffic controllers because the union has been infested with DEI considerations. Okay, that may be one part of the problem, but the other part of the problem is the federal government's getting all this money from every time somebody buys a plane ticket, every single time, and there's an implied deal there, and the deal is the federal government spending enough money to make flying safe in this country, and it doesn't sound like the government's living up to its end of the bargain.
Yeah. Well, Tom, speaking of the air traffic controllers, there was a problem, I guess. We're light about 3,000 air traffic controllers across the country. And one of the things that Sean Duffy is suggesting is raising the retirement age so that, because people do it for about 25 years and retire, I guess, and he wants them to stick around a little bit longer.
Pilots can fly longer than the air traffic controllers.
Yeah. So, maybe there are some short-term fixes that would help this. Nothing's a short-term fix, but things that they could do quickly to help alleviate some of the problem.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea, and certainly, invention's the mother of necessity, and we have needs that have to be. There's always a solution in the short term, right? It's just a matter of taking the time, and it looks like finally we're focused on it, and that's a good thing because government is typically reactive, and we don't want to wait until another tragedy happens. We need to get ahead of this as fast as we can, and I think it seems like Sean Duffy's doing that.
Yeah, I like that. Invention is the mother of necessity. I kind of think about that.
Around.
I know,
but I kind of like it that way.
Jesus,
necessity's.
Yeah, but I like it.
I was going to effortlessly correct Tom just by mentioning it the right way and not draw attention to it.
Andy wanted to embarrass me about it.
No, I didn't want to embarrass you. I want to think about that because I think those kinds of inversions are. There might be some wisdom in that, Tom.
So he's quoting Sam Snead and helping you reinvent aphorisms. Andy came back really ready to roll.
Well, I did miss you guys. It was hard to be away. There was so much going on, but I was at my nephew's wedding. I would say, and it was a great time. But
Andy,
it's good to be back.
I want to know where you found that Sam Snead quote, though.
I don't know. It's in my readings. I'll send it to you. I think.
Trump would have liked Sam Snead. Sam Snead wore those hats. You guys remember? Are you old?
Yeah.
Tom, you would. Those straw hats.
Yeah.
And after he retired from golf, and in those days you'd win the Masters, you'd be paid like $18,000, But when he retired, he would sell them out of his trunk of his car. He'd go play tournaments around here, charity tournaments and whatnot. And a friend of mine named Wayne Vallis once bought one from him. He'd sell them for $20. So, yeah. Trump and Sam Snead have a lot in common.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. Don't go away. When we come back, I'm going to talk about the, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the idea that we're going to have most favored nation status for our pharmaceuticals. So we'll be back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined now by Jerry Rodgers. He is editor of Real Clear Health and Real Clear Policy, and he is the host of the Jerry Rodgers Show on WBAL Radio in Baltimore. You can hear him Sunday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. He's also on most podcast platforms with that show. So, Jerry, you're a busy guy. I appreciate you taking the time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. And today's a busy day with all kinds of announcements and trips and healthcare policy. My goodness.
Yeah. So, yeah, as you mentioned, like Donald Trump announced today, Monday, that he signed his executive order that he said was one of the most consequential in American history. He's declaring that the U.S. will pay the same price for pharmaceuticals for Medicare, I believe, at the lowest price charged anywhere in the world. This is what's called most favored nation status in trade talks. What's behind the thinking, and were you surprised by this move?
I'm not surprised because Donald Trump has talked about drug prices this term, the election, his last administration. He wants to bring drug prices down. This is not the way to do it. And again, I support the president when he does right. When he goes left, I have to call him out on this. I don't understand his thinking here because, like you said, MFN Medicaid pricing impacts Medicaid, not Medicare, not the private market. So we're talking about Medicaid here. Most Americans, most consumers, patients will see no change in the price they pay for medicine. That's not how he talked today in the press conference. He said today, well, if you're taking this drug and they pay this in England, this in America, you'll pay what they pay in Europe. That's not true. This executive order doesn't do that. So it forces me to think that this is a art of the deal executive order to get the pharmaceutical industry to negotiate better prices overall. That's where I think the president is heading.
And the argument, I guess, about MFN or about the general position is that this will somehow penalize American pharmaceutical manufacturers because it will put them at a disadvantage when it comes to research. And thus, this will hurt consumers down the road because there's less money for research and that sort of thing. That's sort of the standard argument you hear whenever anyone tries to do anything to regulate pharmaceutical prices. Does that hold in this case as well?
It does. Even though patients won't see lower prices, the pharmaceutical industry, the American pharmaceutical industry, will see less profit because even though the Medicaid prices are already price controlled, set by the government, there is some profit there that the industry uses for research and development. Now, it's true. The president says that we pay more here than in Europe and other parts of the world. That's 100% true. But the thing is, and the president said today, the pharma companies should walk away from bad deals. You see, they can't do that. So if Canada, if a province in Canada says to Pfizer, we will pay X for this medicine, and Pfizer says no, well, then Canada can compulsory license, that is, take the patent and give it to a local generic company and produce the medicine. And so the companies have very little power to negotiate with European and Canadian price controls. This is an area where the president could step in and protect American companies. He said that today, but I don't see how this tying Medicaid prices to price-controlled European lowest price, how that helps American companies. I don't see how it helps American patients because in the long run, we'll see less money going into research and development.
But the argument, I guess, and again, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but if you step back from it, the general feeling among Americans is, hey, wait, we are getting ripped off here because
Yes,
basically we are paying these high prices to subsidize, in effect, other countries that have more socialized medicine and can have, because their governments have, as you say, stronger regulations that allow them to control prices. This is a global market. Why should Americans be subsidizing the research for drugs that are going to be consumed around the world? And with it, the global market being so large, if we stop that subsidy, what's the convincing argument at this point that would really affect R&D?
Well, because again, even though the companies pay a price-controlled or they're engaged in price controls overseas, there's still some profit. And if you take that profit away, again, there's less money going into research. Here's a falsehood. This idea that pharma puts more money into advertising than it does into research. Advertising is a dollar invested, $2 made. It's separate from research. Research dollars are real dollars going into new cures. Here's what we can do, because what you say is true. The premise is true. We are, Donald Trump's words, Americans are suckers because we are subsidizing the world. That is the absolute truth. So know what we can do? We can deal with the PBMs, the middlemen who drive up pharmaceutical prices. We can make better trade deals. This is an area of expertise of the president. Make better trade deals with Europe and Canada to get better prices. We can undo the regulatory burdens at FDA. We can invest better in science, right? There's lots of complaints now about NIH cutting funding and cutting science and cutting grants. Well, because we're wasting hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on politicized science. Maybe we could reinvest those dollars that would eventually find new cures that would bring drug prices down. There are things this president can do today to bring drug prices down. Again, this is not that.
And so how are the pharmaceuticals companies reacting to this?
Well, I know that they are in a tailspin. I mean, I'm the editor of Real Clear Health. I have been bombarded with links and original submissions. And here's the funny thing about this: the right of center market-based organizations are against this. Steve Moore, who's an ally of the president, an economist for the president, has come out this morning. He's against this. The Wall Street Journal, National Taxpayers Union, go on and on down the list. But there's silence from the left. There's no one. Where's Bernie Sanders? Where are the patient organizations? You would think that they would like this. And this shows you how politics has gotten way too deep in our healthcare discussion, because there are groups that want this kind of price control policy, but they haven't said anything yet because it's Trump. We have a problem in healthcare policy that because it's Trump, we don't like it. And we're not going to comment on it. This is true in other areas of public policy. So I'm very curious to see what the Bernie Sanders bloc will say about this.
Yeah. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Jerry Rodgers. He is the editor of Real Clear Health and Real Clear Policy. And we're talking about health policy. So he's the guy we go to when we talk about this stuff. That's really interesting. I mean, where is the support coming for this sort of thing? If the because you're right, the crowd that would normally be applauding this sort of thing are going to be silent on this because it's Trump. But there must be people in the White House who think this is a good idea. Well,
again, Trump has a unusual coalition that put him in office. And if you're J.D. Vance, if you're Marco Rubio, if you're someone who thinks they could be the next president and have MAGA support, you want the Bernie Bros, right? So this is, again, Trump, very Reagan-esque. Again, I disagree with the policy, but this is very Reagan-esque in that he's going directly to the American people. He's bypassing the organizations and the political power brokers, and he's going right to the voter in Minnesota or Indiana who usually votes Democrat. He's talking to them, and to that extent, this might be a political winner for him. But again, it's not a policy winner.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's true. You never lose votes in heartland America by going after big pharma, right?
Yes. Well, that's unfortunate too, because I watched this press conference. He does advance untruths about big pharma. And here, my thing about big pharma is they don't always do the right thing, but this is a miraculous American sector. And we should be doing everything. Other countries protect what's theirs. They protect their economic interests. We are the world's greatest innovator, and we should be working. Government policy should be working to advance innovation and modernity and health policy, and not doing things to make it more difficult, to stifle medical progress.
Well, we got about a minute left here, and I do want to ask you about this issue that you brought up, which is comes up from time to time, and that is banning advertising for pharmaceuticals, which would be a huge blow, as you know, to the cable
Yes.
news, which actually is a kind of an interesting wrinkle on this. You think if you're the president, I don't want to give him any ideas, but if you're the president, you really want to put it to CNN and MSNBC. You stop pharmaceutical advertising. You put a real crimp in their business model. But what do you make of the push to ban advertising?
I think you just hit it on the head. I think there are advisors and Trump himself who want to give it to the media, and this is the best way to do that. I'm against banning advertising. I have gone through some health issues, and I've learned a lot from what I see. I know they're ubiquitous and annoying, but an informed patient, an informed consumer is always the best consumer, best patient. So, and also there's a free speech issue here. But I think you're right, though. I think this is a way to go after big media, and that's the driver.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jerry, we're going to have to leave it there. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I've been talking with Jerry Rodgers. He is the editor of Real Clear Health and Real Clear Policy, both of which you can find online, and you can listen to Jerry on the radio. Thanks, Jerry, for being here. You're listening again to Real Clear Politics. Andrew Walworth. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great evening.